Okay, so we're at 10:30, so I'd like to start off. And first of all, just a little bit of housekeeping to everyone. For all attendees, again, if you're not getting a gallery view, you can go and click the direct link and come back in, and that should give you the option for a gallery view, so you can see all of us at once. Otherwise, you'll just get whomever's speaking. Also, we're not going to use the raised hand function, and all the attendees will be mute during the discussion, so don't feel like we're ignoring you. That's just the way everyone's handling the panels. And we'll have a Q&A at the end of the day, or at the end of the discussion in the last 15 minutes. So if you have questions for our fabulous authors, then please put them in the chat, and then our lovely host Darcy will feed them to me, and I'll be able to pass them on to the panelists at the end. So thanks everyone for coming. I feel so privileged to be moderating this panel. The great thing about moderating can be a little bit nerve-wracking sometimes, but the great thing about moderating is that it gives you a really great excuse to read some great novels. And I just want to say, first of all, that I've read multiple novels. Kate's only got one so far, but multiple novels from all of these other writers. And I would just run, not walk, after the panel to your nearest favorite online bookstore and get some of their novels, because it's made my last couple of weeks a really happy time. So I love all of their books. So I'm very happy to introduce all of them today. I'm Wendell Thomas. I write the Sid Redondo mysteries, Lost Luggage and Drown Under, and I also have a story in Murder a Go-Go's, which has a lot of swearing, so and I'd like to start out with our debut novelist, Kate Lansing. Kate, her book Killer Chardonnay, see, I'm nervous too. Killer Chardonnay came out this year, correct? And
yes.
First novel, there it is. And she's an award-winning short story novel writer. She's got in the Brave New Girls anthology and the Colfax anthology as well. And she's got a new book coming out next year, right?
Yep, in January, book 2, A Pairing to Die For, the follow-up to Killer Chardonnay, will be coming out.
Great. As we were discussing, if you're here earlier, she is right outside Denver. So welcome, Kate. I'd like to welcome Jen Malliet. She is an extraordinarily accomplished author. She won the Agatha for her first book, and she's nominated for multiple awards, including this year for Macavity for her story Whiteout. She's also been nominated for Macavities before, as well as the Anthony Awards for her 2 series, the St. Just Mysteries and also the Max Tudor Mysteries. And you have a new St. Just coming out, don't you?
I do, next year.
Yeah.
The 4th in that series. Yeah, I'm picking up that series after 10 years.
Yeah, that's exciting though. You guys have been
pretending 10 years didn't happen. It works.
That's good. And you've also sold the film rights to the Max Tudors, right?
They've been optioned.
Nothing.
The pandemic pretty much put the brakes on that.
Yeah, it put the brakes on everything, I think, including lipstick, among other things. But anyway, so she's former marketing executive for PBS and USA Today, and very happy to have her here with us today. Cindy Sample has been nominated for a Lefty for Best Humorous Novice 5 times. Is that correct? 5 nominations. So I think that qualifies you for the panel, if nothing else. She is well known for her chase scenes, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But I think her extraordinarily great chase scenes in every book in the Laurel McKay series, and I love the series in particular because there's a lot of great physical comedy in Cindy's work, and so I'm a huge fan of that. So welcome, Cindy. And Sherry Harris, former president of Sisters in Crime, and also, as she said, in Cheyenne, Wyoming, she also gave us these stock market tips on the radio as well. She's also Agatha nominated for Best First, and so we have a really distinguished panel. I'm so thrilled to see everybody here today. So thank you very much for coming, and thanks to everyone for showing up. And again, we're not going to use the raise hand function. I know some of you are raising your hands, so just know that that's not happening. Okay, so I'd just like to start out. I know that several of you have been pretty clear about your early influences. Christy, several others. I think, Kate, you and I share a fondness for the Mixed Up Files, Mrs. Baisley Frankweiler. I know, huge fan of that book. But I'd like to talk a little bit about who your favorite comic mystery writers are, or even if it's a film writer that you think, but where you kind of get inspiration for specifically the comic elements of your stories. Sherry, you want to start off on that one?
Sure. First, Wendell, thanks for doing this for us. And everybody needs to read your books because I read Lost Luggage last week and it is so funny. I really loved it. So
you say, gonna make me cry.
Yeah. Oh, no crying today. You know, I love the early Janet Ivanovich books. And if I get depressed, I'll go grab one of those and read it. Kelly Garrett's 2 Detective by Day series are so funny and warm, and they're just fabulous. In fact, I keep trying to tell her she needs to write another one, even though I know she's working on something new. But both of those are 2 of my favorite go-tos when I need something to laugh about.
Yeah, I love both of those as well. How about you, Kate? Do you have a favorite?
Well, and I see Cynthia signed in, so I'm going to embarrass her, and Jennifer Chow.
Oh,
So
yeah.
those Jennifer's book is the Mimi Lee Gets a Clue, the Sassy Cat series, and I read that recently. She's another debut, and you know what? The cats are just so fun. Marshmallow and the sarcasm. It's just such a fun book, and I'm reading the second one now. I got a sneak peek of it. It comes out in a couple weeks. Cynthia Kuhn writes the Lila McLean series, and those are, you know what? Those have been great. They're always fun, and I just love them. And then Lindy Walker is one who her Headlines and High Heels series came out a long time ago when I was first starting to dabble with cozies. And that one inspired me so much because of the humor she incorporated with the voice. And it was like, this is what I want to write. You know, it was just so inspiring to read that one. So those are a few that come to mind that I just love those. Yeah.
And Jen, how about you? Because I know you're influenced by Christy very much in terms of your setup and everything, but in terms of comedy, do you have any favorites?
Well, this is a bit off topic, but what's gotten me through the pandemic is watching Doc Martin reruns from the beginning because of the humor. Really, the most wonderful shows. And I'm sorry that it's ending next year. But I read Robert Bernard years and years ago. I was just his biggest fan. And the British, I think, are especially good at this, just putting language together, bits of language, and coming up with this tremendously funny, just a single sentence or a setup of a pompous politician, for example, being taken down a notch. You know, he's just brilliant at that. He's not with us any longer, but he wrote some really good books, especially in the beginning. And then, I don't know, Agatha could be funny, but it was more just a quick dart, and then she'd go on with the story, you know. But I did, of course, very influenced by her.
Yeah, and your descriptions of your characters are so hilarious. We'll get to that in a little bit, but I think there's so much wit in the way that you describe the town or the village and the characters. I can see those little jabs in there too, so it's fantastic. Cindy, what about you? Do you have a favorite influence or a favorite go-to for a comedy?
Well, I now have 4 new favorite authors. All of your books were just a wonderful break from the pandemic. So I thank you very much. Highly recommend it. I think Janet Ivanovich was the first. Her early books kind of made it okay to include humor in the books. You know, it's not a bad thing. It's fine. Actually, there's so many great authors. One of my very favorites, I know she's listening, but that's not why I'm saying it, is Heather Haven, writes the Alvarez murder mysteries. And it's a family. They run the discretionary inquiries, and they're just fabulously well fleshed out, caring family, but so funny, just like Heather. So
yeah, I think those are great as well. I love those. Now, when you were first starting out, in terms of these series that have humor incorporated into them, was there did you set out to write something humorous, or did you choose the genre? I mean, was that a consideration in your starting, the idea that you wanted to use humor, or was it just something that kind of filtered in? I don't know. Jen, what about you?
I chose the village setting, just I don't know why exactly, but it's very fun to have characters that do play off of each other. There's always one person who's deeply hated, and that usually works in a comic type mystery. what I found was I chose as my protagonist Max Tudor, this insanely handsome vicar, and just describing the way women in the village react to this man. It's like they never saw a man before, and that was just more fun than anything. I've never had a plan, anything that you would call a plan. It just sort of happens and evolves.
Yeah, just the name Nether Monk Slip makes me laugh every single time I read it. So that alone was so fantastic. But it's interesting, I think, whether you decide to, we'll talk a little bit more about this later in terms of planning sequences or set pieces or anything in the comedy and writing them. But I think you're very much a pantser, as it were, from what I read. You kind of just write, not plan out so much. Is that correct?
Half and half, really.
Half and half.
Yeah. I get going and then I realize I'm lost and I have to start writing things down.
I know. It's going to be, it takes a lot more rewriting the pantsing approach. That's what I found anyway. And Kate, how about you? How much were you considering some of these other authors, or did you definitely want to go into this particular kind of subgenre of mysteries?
Cozies. Well, I know when I started writing Killer Chardonnay, I had just had my daughter, who's now 3.5. And so if you hear noise in the background, that's just her. But she, anyway, when I had just had her, and I had all these other ideas. You know, you don't realize when you first start writing, ideas are really the easy part, because then you have all these things and you think, what am I going to give attention to? And at that time, I really wanted something lighthearted. I wanted to escape from being the new mom and, you know, that role that I feel like I was in all the time. And so I wrote about, I wanted to write about something funny. I knew I wanted it to be funny and humorous. And of course, wine. I thought, what better, you know, after not having a drink for 12 months than to let's delve into winemaking. But yeah, no, it was definitely intentional to write something humorous and lighthearted, because that's the escape I felt like I needed at the time.
Yeah. And Sherry, how about you? Because you've got the incredible Garage Sale Mysteries, the Sarah Winston, which I love. Now, were you looking for the comedy in yard sales, of which there's a lot, actually?
You know, honestly, no. I just started writing the story, and I think part of in the first book, especially, the humor comes from Sarah not living in New England and finding all these funny things that people in New England say and do. And so I didn't really go, okay, I'm going to write a funny book. I'm going to write a mystery that's not going to be terribly dark, was more, and then it just kind of flows from there.
Yeah. And do you feel, I mean, your new series, which I love, starts with From Beer to Eternity, the Sea Glass Saloon Mysteries. Very funny. Is it different for that now that you've written the other series? Do you feel like you chose that setting more to be comic, or?
No, again,
It's funny.
It happens. I think putting somebody from Beer to Eternity, Chloe is from Chicago and a librarian, and she ends up in the panhandle of Florida, which is very Southern, and is working in a bar. And so I think some of the humor, but I didn't go, okay, I'm going to do this, so this will be funny. And honestly, I'm always surprised when somebody goes, oh, that made me laugh out loud. I'm like, really? So.
No, I love Elwell Pugh is my favorite name of any character possibly ever. That made me laugh.
It just popped into my head. That name was funny. I agree.
Very funny. And so, Cindy, what about you? Because you do have a lot of physical comedy in your books, especially. Was that an inspiration, or did you want to? Was it more come from the character of Laurel?
Well, I wanted to write a series with a mom as a protagonist, because back in the 90s when I first got the idea, it was usually a single woman. And my Laurel McKay starts out, she's a 39-year-old single soccer mom. And it's very possible that I was a 39-year-old newly divorced soccer mom, and, dealing with, eventually dating and job and the kids and everything like that. And, it's pretty bad when your first date, is found dead, but it's even worse when you find out you're a snack mom and you forgot all about it. So, there's a lot of things like that in there. And I my character is a klutz. You know, some people say she's klutzier than can be believable, but Katrina McPherson says she's a pale imitation of me. And she's correct. So I have so many stories to share. And my daughter calls them mishaps, and I call them future funny stories. So they end up in my books all the time. So they weren't intentionally meant to be funny. That's just how my life has gone.
Yeah, and I think that juxtaposition that kind of seems to be a thread through all of these, with Max Tudor as a vicar who was MI5, and you know, the incredible librarian who's now making drinks, and you know, the student who was now a winemaker. It's all same thing. So I think the juxtaposition, do you think that that's something that allows you space for humor between those two areas that you might not have if your character were more consistent or didn't have a different kind of backstory?
Well, yeah, Max has to use his sleuthing skills in, you know, solving these cases. It really comes in handy. He was hoping to get away from all of that, from the violence and bombs and things in London, and coming to this little village. But of course, it doesn't work out that way.
Yeah, he still has to do that. But he also has a little bit of glee in doing these investigations, or at least I feel like that reading the books. Does he get excited?
Yeah, he likes being the smartest guy in the room, although he's very modest. But yeah.
Yeah, no, he's a fantastic character. And Sherry, do you think, are you going to use more of the librarian skills with Chloe in the series?
It's been fun to do it from some days she kind of compares herself to a children's book that she's read, or, you know, she said that drunks and toddlers weren't that different because they both, you know, throw tantrums and they both take naps in inappropriate places. And so, yeah, I do. I really, and I have a go-to friend, Sherry Randall, who's also a mystery writer, that was a children's librarian. And so I'll send her little emails. What would Sherry do, you know, to figure out what Chloe should be doing?
Yeah, because I think the idea that she has that background in the environment she's in now, I think makes her just a whole other level of interesting as well.
Well, thanks.
Wait, do you find that the fact that, you know, I'm totally spacing on your character's name. How can I do that at this moment? Parker Valentine. Does she, because she's always on the edge of like losing money and not being able to continue the winery, do you feel like that is what's going to keep kind of some of your comedy going, or do you feel like that's more a suspense nature?
You know,
in the story?
The intent was to make it more of a suspense nature, and I think for cozies, you're always having to suspend disbelief on why is this person investigating and putting herself in danger, and so that was the role of that. You know, for Parker, I think a lot of her humor is through her voice. You know, Sherry mentioned, you know, incorporating like the librarian, you know, and so for Parker, she's always going like, oh, his alibi is as weak as a box of Franzia, you know, and like just little like winemaking things. Anytime you can get sort of that, what the niche is or what their passion is into their internal thoughts, that's where I tried, you know, and every time I think of like the stupidest pun, I'm like, well, maybe I'll give it a shot. Maybe this is something. And, you know, Parker thinks it and ended up in there.
Yeah, and I think that idea of using lingo actually for whatever their thing is can give you a lot of humor actually, because it makes that voice very specific. So you feel like most of the humor in your books, from your point of view, it comes from the voice itself as opposed to trying to create like comedy or set pieces.
Yes, I think so. I think it stems from the narration. I think the hard part about writing humor is you never really know what somebody's going to find funny until they tell you or until you hear some feedback. But from Parker, my initial thought was always to have it stem more from her narration and her voice a little bit. And, you know, she's young and she is on Twitter. She's aware of hashtags and, you know, some of these things also just all feed into it. And anytime I think I can make something, I don't know, funny, I try to. And that works out well with first person present tense or first person, which a lot of cozies are written in. You know, you can do that with voice.
And do you find that, Cindy, you've got a great narration as well, but where do you feel like the most comedy lies in your particular books?
Well,
in the
Yeah,
series.
yeah, very similar. I mean, one of the biggest compliments I receive is that Laurel is really relatable. Everybody wants to be her friend. So yeah, there's a lot of internal monologue that is pretty much stating the things that we all want to say out loud, but we really hold it in. So she gets the opportunity to share possibly some of my opinions. And then I do a lot of situational things, like you referred to my chase scenes. I
The
love
chase
love
is like my
chase,
favorite.
love chase scenes in movies. And I wanted to be really original. So in the first book, Dying for a Date, I actually was driving by a construction site and I thought, well, I don't think anybody's ever had a backhoe chase scene. So I have the world's slowest chase scene. But I
You know, you
think
have the snowmobile, you have the wagon, you've got a lot.
yeah, I've got, and then I got the zip line chase scene in Hawaii. And then let's see, we have this big wagon train that goes through Placerville. So in Dying for a Dude, there's a stagecoach, a runaway buggy, and then a horse that can jump over Mini Coopers. And it's really fun. I drove up and down the town making sure I knew where everything was and where that horse was going to land.
Right. And does it take a lot of time to construct those chase scenes? Like, do you do a lot of rewriting on them, or it take figuring them out?
It takes, well, the backhoe one, I actually called John Deere and went over that. And then they wouldn't let me climb up their backhoe, but I found a backhoe. I drove around looking through all these subdivisions that were under construction. So I climbed up, and then I do a lot of YouTube videos, you know, how to push the buttons and making sure I have that right. And the zip line I didn't do because I have a bad neck and a bad back, but I did go up on the stand and they strapped me in the equipment and everything. And I watched many videos on that. So, and then in the last book, Dying for a Dude, is a tandem bicycle scene, which is another interesting chase scene.
No,
hard to get away from the bad guy on a tandem bike.
Yes, it is, especially when they're in a car or an SUV. So that's tricky. I know. Now, Jen, you don't write in first person. So do you feel like that gives you an extra layer for commentary that's comical, or does that have any influence on kind of the humor in your books, do you think?
I think it has a lot of influence on the humor. There's this narrator, this omniscient narrator who sees into everyone's heart and can describe what's going on in there, which you can't do first person. In fact, my only try at first person, really, I found that just annoying to be, it felt like I was inside my own head all the time, writing about this person, as much as I tried to make her different because she was a murderer, but it just didn't work. And I wasn't enjoying it quite as much as I enjoy the other books I wrote.
Yeah, and I think that comes from Christie's influence as well, right? In some ways. I mean, do you think?
Well, she wrote Endless Night in first person, and that was so extremely well done. Yeah. And the trick to that, of course, was not giving away, because you're only getting this person's thoughts and giving away what he's really doing. It's hard to do.
Yeah, it is. And so you never considered doing it from Max's point of view?
I did. That's the book that just really... I got bogged down. I want to rewrite that book. If this one I would go back and rewrite, that would be it. Yeah. It was called Wake 'Em, Don't Look for It. The publisher folded. Probably because of that book. I'm never sure.
But I found it particularly, your descriptions of everyone in the village are very hilarious. You know, I think your timing and all of that in the narrative voice is one of my favorite things about your book. And I think that allows you a lot of humor so that you can kind of, I don't know, we love the characters, but you can also have a little bit of fun with them, I think, in a way that they don't realize they're funny. So it allows you that distance, which I really love. Yeah, exactly. And Sherry, do you think that there's, I don't know, how about you in terms of finding the humor in, and especially in the new Panhandle thing? Do you make drinks? Do you got some cocktail humor?
I don't make drinks, although my daughter and I have been experimenting some with that.
Yeah, it's pandemic cocktails, I think.
Yeah, really. We made a really great lemonade one this summer that it's just enough tart to it, but drinks are kind of funny, actually, and you can use them in various ways in the book. And
Yeah, because I thought, choosing, well, the Panhandle, which is Southern, I'm from North Carolina, so I understand, and I lived in Gainesville, so I understand that whole like Southern thing.
Yes.
But also the whole idea of funny things do happen. People are funny in bars. I mean, they're peculiar, but there is, I think that idea of having kind of a bar setting at the beach it seems very rich to me in terms of what you can do with the characters.
I think so too.
Tourists,
My editor at Kensington and I were tossing around ideas, and he came up with, let's do a beach bar. And he originally suggested Key West, but I'm not very familiar with it. But I did live in the Panhandle for 3 years and have been a number of times because my parents live there. And so I was like, hey, the Panhandle is a really interesting mix.
And it's underwritten. It's
right.
underwritten, the Panhandle.
Right. And Lucy Burdett does such a great job with her Key West mysteries. And I was like, I couldn't do that. So it was fun.
Hard.
Yeah.
I know. But do you think, and so when so you don't really rewrite for comedy. You don't really necessarily go back and punch up jokes or try to work on a sequence when she gets caught, sleeping on the boat or anything. Is there any of that?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I think in the first draft, it is much more just getting the story out. And then I go back and so in my other series, the yard sale series, I realized the opening of Absence for Alice, which comes out in December, was really grim and kind of scary. And so I put in 2 scenes before I got to that to lighten everything up because I was afraid everybody'd be stabbing their eyes out by the time they got through the first chapter otherwise. So.
And do you find, I don't know, I just feel like, is there anything funny that any of you guys found out in your research, aside from the backhoe? Cindy, but that you wound up using in books, or is it something that was hilarious to you, but you never actually wound up using? Any funny stories that you came across researching your books?
I have a kind of a funny how not to research a book story. I was taking ballroom dance lessons because you're never too old to learn how to ballroom dance, even if you're inept. And I was starting dying for a dance. And when you do group ballroom dance lessons, they have, you change partners.
All the time. I know.
So, yeah. So you'll dance with the man and then move on, so you get a different level of expertise. And so I walked up to this tall guy, and he's wearing a polo shirt, and it says CSI on it. I thought, oh wow, this is great. And I said, hey, I'm trying to kill someone with a stiletto heel. Where in his head should I hit him? And he kind of looked at me, and then the music started, and we did a little 2-step or whatever. And then I moved on to the next guy, and I thought, good, this will give him time to, think about how I should kill this guy. And so I made my way around the circle, and when I got back, he was gone. He left the class, he left the studio, he never came back. And I learned from now on, first you give someone your bookmark, then you ask them how to kill someone.
Yeah, I think Katrina said that yesterday. First you say, I'm a mystery writer, and then like, how do I kill? That's hilarious. But I love I wonder where he is now. He's still.
I do wonder where he is. Yeah, and it's probably Charles Schwab, not CSI.
The Culinary Suicide Institute.
Yeah.
Jen, what about you? I read that you've found a lot of vicars and priests who had other jobs. Was there the funniest combo that you ever came across in terms of researching that world?
Well, yet one was a priest and a medical examiner. It's more peculiar than funny. Max Tudor himself is based on a former CIA agent who became a priest. He was involved in the Iranian hostage thing. And after that, he said, I'm going to do something meaningful, more meaningful to me. But I can't remember another one. They have day jobs, which I didn't realize. I thought if you're a vicar, that's a full-time job, which it is. But you can also do whatever you want. You can be a doctor.
I never knew that.
Yeah, I didn't. Right now, I'm just steeped in researching Cornwall. I'm all over the news sites. I popped in on a meeting, a village meeting by Zoom which is the beauty of this
God, that's so
technology.
great. You can do that? That is fantastic. Oh, please tell us.
They may have learned not to put the link out there for everyone. Because I was expecting like a group, like 30, 40 people, and I could kind of blend in. There are only 12 of them. And
there you are.
Say, I'm a mystery writer, and that's because I thought that's probably going to freak them out. So I just sat there and listened, and got some information that way on the preoccupations of villagers. But I'm sure they wondered who was that?
Are you?
Was that woman?
Yeah, what's the pettiest thing you found in kind of village politics? The very pettiest. Is there?
God,
it's hard to pick, right?
Well, I have an HOA where I live, and we didn't get the mulch one year, and wasn't that a thing? It's just, it's just stuff like that. And I won't mention the politics. I just won't mention political signs, which we're not allowed to have.
Yeah, I'm sure. But yeah, I think the whole small world. My very first job, I was the first single woman to teach in an all-male boarding school in a tiny town, and my post office box was 3. and that small little tiny, like it's just unbelievable the machinations that go on in a small community. It's so rich for comedy and murder, I think, in such a great way. So it's one of the reasons I love your book so much. Now, do you guys read any noir? Do you read in terms of your mystery reading to prepare? Do you have other kind of subgenres that you read a lot, or do you tend to read more? I mean, I know you've mentioned comic books that you like, but I know you're a Joe Pike fan, Sherry. So
Yeah.
do you read noir a lot, or do you read more Michael Connelly-esque, or what do you do?
I tend to read more thrillers and traditional mysteries. For one thing, I worry about getting cozy voices in my head that aren't mine, but I do love to read a dark book. So. But even Robert Crace books are funny.
Yeah.
Joe Pike and Elvis Cole are just interesting characters. So,
yeah. How about any of the rest of you? Do you tend to read on the darker end of the spectrum? Do you tend to read non-mysteries? Like, Kate, what about you? You're nodding.
Yeah, I love reading a broad range of things. I've seen a lot of the comments from the attendees mentioning Louise Penny, and I've been working my way through her series, the Gamache series this year. And I know she's not cozy, she's more traditional, but those still make me laugh. The characters she manages to write, those villagers in Three Pines, I just want to go there. I want to go hang out with them. They're hilarious, and it's just exceptional. So I love her stuff. I've been especially enjoying it this year. I also really like to read a lot of rom-coms, which sounds funny. At least that's what I've been enjoying this year, I guess. If I need a break from murder, reading about some romance is kind of fun. Sophie Kinsella is one of my favorites. There's a lot of really good debuts with books coming out this year too that are really great that I've just been enjoying. I read a broad spectrum. I actually just read a graphic novel by Allie Brosh, she lives in Denver, and her recent one had me laughing so hard I was in tears. And it was just all books. Noir, I have to be in the right mindset for noir and going super dark, which is a little bit harder at this just in 2020, I think, but I do love that stuff.
Yeah. What about you, Cindy? Do you read widely, or do you stay in a couple of lanes?
Yeah, I used to read probably more widely, and there are some favorites, like Michael Connelly. Patricia Smiley writes a great new police.
She's great. Her series is great.
Yeah, her stuff is terrific. Leanne Moriarty, I love, and they did The Big Little Lies on HBO, which captured the suspense, but it really didn't capture the wit. She is an incredibly witty writer. I love her stuff, but I do tend to, especially this year, I seem to need humor a lot. So whether it's in books or I just whiz through the whole Agatha Raisin cozy on Acorn TV. And that is a great escapist thing. Great acting too. And you get to see the scenery in the Cotswolds. Oh, I want to live there.
And Jen, do you feel like, do you read darker stuff as well? I know you said you're clinging to Doc Martin, so lately maybe more humorous. But if you read other subgenres, what are your favorites?
I'm like Sherry. I tend to read bestsellers, frankly, suspense thriller kind of thing. Not so much in my own genre because, as Sherry said, I don't want to pick it up like lint.
Voice.
It will wear off on whatever I'm doing. I get the raise, and I'm coming to the end of that series too. And oh man, they can't make these fast enough for me. They're so funny. I never really read the books much, but the series is brilliant.
I love that. Now, this brings us kind of naturally to the idea of like, has it been harder to be funny in the last few months? I know everybody's talked about the pandemic. I couldn't be funny for months. And it took me forever to write anything that I thought might be even vaguely funny. So any thoughts on that? Has it been, I mean, we've talked about harder to write, but especially harder to be funny or witty, do you find? Sherry, what do you think? Has it been, how's this affected your writing in terms of tone?
So I barely wrote for March and April. I read a lot. I know some people said they couldn't read, but that was just.
Yeah, I read like crazy. I couldn't write at all.
Me too. But I had a deadline. And so I think once you immerse yourself back in the world of the characters, and became a great escape too. And I didn't find it really any harder to be funny since I've been writing again than I did before. So I'm very grateful for that. And I have a lot of funny people around me, and that helps. So
yeah, it does help. Cindy, what about you? Was it harder to be funny, or I mean, whatever you're working on now, is it harder, or were you fine?
Yeah, it's actually complicated. I had actually written, I was working on book 9, Laurel book, which about 60 pages into a set in Las Vegas. And her best friend, Stan, is trying out for Vegas Loves Talent, like America's Got Talent. And it was going to be set during Comic-Con. And then the world sort of came to a stop. And I kind of waited 30 days and I thought, I don't know what Vegas is going to be like, after the pandemic, when the pandemic ends, if it ever ends, so I kind of put it aside, and I've been wanting to start a series set in Washington. And that actually features Laurel's cousin, Sierra Sullivan, who was the cruise director in Dying for a Diamond. So she has now been furloughed by the cruise line, very appropriate, sort of post-pandemic. And, she's used to performing in front of 1,500 people, on the board the ship. And her first job in Washington is at playing Elsa at a 6-year-old's birthday party. So it's a little bit of a come down, but then I realized, okay, nobody's wearing masks. They're not social distancing. Am I writing a mystery? Am I writing science fiction? I'm not sure where. So I'm still writing the book, and the humor is finally coming back. It was hard at first, but it was good to have a diversion, and I'm just going to take my time. Fortunately, I indie published, so I can, wait and release a book whenever the heck I want to.
How about you, Kate? Was that you? I mean, you obviously were reading a lot of stuff that was cheering you up, but in terms of your own writing, are you working on 3 now? Are you?
I am working on 3, and like Sherry, I have a deadline, and so that helps. But it is harder to be funny. I found dialogue is witty banter, right? How are you supposed to write witty banter? I can't go on buses and eavesdrop anymore. I can't go to restaurants and listen in. You have to stay far enough away. You don't
hear. It's the town hall meetings. You need to get in on these.
I need to sneak into one of these council meetings. Like, Jen, it's brilliant. No, but it's definitely been challenging. I think I have to be careful not to doom scroll, separate myself if I start. I have to be careful which content I'm consuming, right? You have to really taper that and make sure it's sometimes fun things. Sometimes it's the Great British Bake Off has been,
yes.
What would we do without these shows this year, right? And I find that I can fill up my creative well, and that with humor, and be able to write it more effectively if I'm just making sure I'm listening to music and reading books that fill me up rather than.
Yeah. And Jen, how about you? Has it had an effect on your writing, the pandemic, in terms of, your wit and your comedy, or no?
Do you know, this sounds maybe cold-blooded or something, but my escape has always been comedy and writing. And when the world is falling apart around me, that's how I cope. So it hasn't affected me, really. If anything, it's just given me more time and fewer excuses not to write. You know, now there's no escaping this little office here. I got to write. But it really had, it's always been, like I said, a coping mechanism. And I don't know what I'd do if I couldn't write and read.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I wish that were the way I were operating. I think that's great. And so I think because we're coming up to almost our Q&A time, I just wanted everybody to talk a little bit, and you can talk about the effect it's had on you of what you're working on now. Talked a little bit, Cindy's talked a little bit about that, but Jen, do you want to talk about what's coming out or what you're writing at the moment? Jen, do you want to?
Oh, sorry. I thought you said Cindy.
Clear, no.
I'm writing this fourth St. Just. It's called St. Just in Cornwall, and that's probably going to be the title. And that's what I'm doing, writing short stories when I can. It's amazing how much time it takes me to write a short story. But
and Whiteout was fantastic, by the way. Thank you. If people know it's on your website, it's really great. It's a great story.
Oh, yeah, Whiteout. Yes, it's free download. Hurry while it's there. I can't decide whether to take it down or not.
Having nominated, it's really good. So read it. And do you find, do books go faster?
No. No. You mean reading or anything else?
No, writing. I find, short stories are easier just for me to go faster because I feel like you can complete them. But but they're harder too in a lot of ways. I mean, they have to be so much more concentrated.
Much harder.
Yeah. Cindy, do you write a lot of short fiction as well, or no? Or have you working on anything now?
I've written 2 short stories. No, they're so hard. And because I tend to do them in the whodunit, it's hard to do a whodunit in 4,000 words.
Yeah,
I did do, because we have a place here called Apple Hill that features donuts. And so I did a short story called The Case of the Caramelized Corpse. And if you read it, you will never eat a caramel apple again. And I won't even tell you if there's a possibility it's a true story. So, and other than that, no, my Washington book, it'll come out when it comes out. All I know is they're called the Spindrift Cove Mysteries. And I have a very democratic process for choosing my covers and my titles. So next month, if you're a newsletter subscriber, you can subscribe on my website, you get to submit a title. And if your title is chosen, you can be a character in the book. So
great. My favorite is still Dying for a Donut, but
that's
so Sherry, what about you in terms of what's coming up next in both of your series? What are you working on right now? Is stuff in the can?
I am writing the 3rd Chloe Jackson mystery, which the title right now is 3 Shots to the Wind. And we'll see. We change them a lot as we go along, but that's what I'm working on right now.
That's great. And Kate, you've got your 3rd one. Is there anything you can tell us a little bit about the just about what's going on in your 3rd?
Yeah, I'm almost done with it. It's amazing. But the 3rd book, the title right now, the working title is Mauled to Death. And it takes place at a ski resort in Colorado, which I was lucky enough to go visit one with my family at the beginning of the year before everything shut down. And I'll just say that just going up to the mountains for that, I've leaned on a lot of that research. But yeah, it takes place up there, sort of a destination cozy, which has been really fun to write. Yeah.
Okay, anything else you guys would like to talk about before we go to the Q&A? And I'll wait for Darcy to send me some questions. Anything you want to talk about, or anything that's coming up for you aside from books? Anything? Sure.
What are you working on, Wendell?
Well, I'm working on my 3rd Sid Redonda, which is called Fogged Off at the moment. They're probably not going to get away with that, but for now. It's actually set in the world of London walking tours, and specifically the Jack the Ripper walking tours. Oh, wow. So, and then I have a historical that I've been working on that was a script first that I've been working on for 25 years, which is now I've decided to change the point of view. So that's a whole horror show. And then I've got a kind of Queen Lear in the New South Black comic standalone. So that's what I'm working on. But you can tell I'm too scattered. That's the whole problem. So if I finish any of them, it'll be a miracle.
Wendell, congratulations on being a finalist for Best Original Paperback.
Oh, thank you very much. I still can't even believe it. I'm actually stunned.
Oh, very well deserved. Very well deserved.
Very kind of you to mention that. Okay, well, let's see. Darcy, you have some questions for us? Let's see. Hold on.
I sent them to you in chat, Wendell, hopefully.
I know. I'm trying to find them. Where do I look for them?
On the bottom,
Right. But they're not. They're
the
not.
little icon, if you just kind of hover under the bottom of the
Right. It says
click it.
panelist. It just says panelist. Sorry, I thought I knew what I was doing here. Yeah. Oh, wait. Here they are. Okay. There they are. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. So we've got a question from Lee Sauer. When I try to be funny, the result is not funny. But when I just let characters get into situations without a comic intent, the result is funnier. Do you find that to be true? You guys, is it more character comedy as opposed to trying to be funny?
I think that's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's organic. It just happens.
Yeah.
And it happens because you've sat down at the computer and not because you've thought about it, because it just emerges.
Yeah, you're in the character's head, or the secondary characters, and the humorous part is very easy for me. I don't think I could try to do it. I don't think I could force it myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sherry, you agree?
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned before, the only time I really have worked on lightening a story was in Absence of Alice, because it was just too grim. And so I did think, what could be funny? So she walks into her favorite Italian restaurant and they're tossing the dough up. Her friend's teaching a class and the dough lands on her head. And so, and I took it from there with that. So
That's good. She would walk under dough. I know. And I think, certainly coming from a screenwriting background, it's always this idea that the characters are totally serious in what they're doing, and that's what makes them funny. So I think I always try to go there in terms of, just the characters trying very hard to do something serious, and it's disastrous. And certainly, I know a lot of you guys have referenced Lucille Ball, but certainly that's always the genius of I Love Lucy, is she was never trying to be funny. She was always just trying to be famous. And,
Right.
and that's what was so funny about her. So I think that's great. And Heather Haven has, hello, Heather, we've talked about you today. So what are the hardest scenes for you to write in terms of, do you think? Is it harder to write the murders? Is it harder to write the?
For me, it's any group scene. And I have never written a chase scene, so congratulations, Cindy. I will tackle that one day maybe, but you have a group of people at a table, maybe 8 or 10 people, and it's just really hard to keep them separate and have the reader understand who's talking.
Yeah, you have some good dinner party scenes though. You do have some really good ones, so you've cracked it. But yeah, that is hard to keep moving the audience's or the reader's attention from one to the other and still be aware of the group, right?
Yeah, it's hard work, those are.
Anybody else have something that's particularly like they hate doing, trickiest?
I hate writing descriptions. I'm one of those people that Elmore Leonard said he leaves out the crap, except he used a different word, that the people skip over. And dialogue and action is easy for me, and I would just take forever doing descriptions. So I don't do them now when I write. I write very lean. I put triple X's in, and then I go back and then I spend a lot of time, but it's just like, this is my homework. This is the revision process to add the description. But that's just me. I'm not sure that's very common.
Yeah. Kate, Sherry, do you have nightmare stuff in the thing you read doing?
I think internal conflict scenes for me are hard. There can't always just be action, action, action. There has to be some, slow down. And I think those sometimes are the hardest because you have to keep the tension up. And how do you keep things snappy and funny? If you're just stuck with a character and she's kind of struggling through things, or maybe she's putting those final pieces together, the aha moment, I think sometimes those are really challenging. In addition to, I agree with Jen, when you have more than 4 characters, I would say, that all have a speaking role, making sure they're all unique and are actually contributing to a scene. And that's, the choreography is very challenging.
Yeah, I think that's right too. Sherry, how about you?
I think it's all hard. But so as far as not maybe a broader thing is writing the middle. I think the middle of a book is, and I've often written the beginning and then skipped ahead and written to the end and gone back, which is a little crazy, but
no, but at least you know where you're going from here to here, right?
And,
at least you narrow
and I don't want to lose the end when it starts popping into my head. So yeah.
No, I agree with that. I think the middle of anything is a nightmare. You know what I mean? And trying to find some event in the middle that can kind of energize everything and push you to the end is always tricky. I know we have a question from Tammy Qualls. Are there any humorous mysteries that aren't cozies that you recommend? I think, Kate, you've mentioned
Louise
a couple.
Penny. Yeah. My sister is a serial killer is hilarious.
Oh, that's good. I love that book too. It is very funny.
Lisa
Anybody
Lutz,
else?
I think Lisa Lutz's books, the Spellman Diaries, is that, or Files, or those are funny.
Yeah.
And they're not cozy.
Yeah.
It's Sue Grafton.
Yeah. And she's Kenzie Milhon is so great. And also Annie Hogsett's books are very funny, and they're more Ivanovich-y than cozy, I think. They're very funny as well. I like her. So any others before we move on?
I saw somebody in the attendees mention the Anna Blanc series by Jennifer Pinchmel.
Oh,
those are
by
great.
They're fantastic. How could I forget that? No, and she's very, very funny, and those books are beautifully written.
Oh, Katrina McPherson's books too, especially the Scottish ones.
Soda.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lexi.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, they are fantastic. She is one of the national treasures, and stolen her from Scotland. So that's good. Okay. Where's the line between humor and over the top that will take it out of the narrative? That's another question. Can you go too far? Is it too much you can do with the body? Any of that stuff? Do you think about that in terms of the humor? Do you pull back at any point? Because you're doing
I do. I mean, I have read books where they make a lot of kind of snarky comments about the dead body, and I try not to do that, except in one of my books, I killed a politician, which everybody thought was a good idea. And it seemed okay to be snarky about that one.
Anybody else have a line, or have you ever backed off of the humor, feeling like maybe you're a little queasy about it?
You know, there's one. Oh no, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish, Wendell.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say there is also, I think, in addition to having to toe the line with being about murder and death, I also think I want my character to come across as smart. And so I don't want to put her in a position where she's constantly tripping over everything or just so over the top klutzy that her intelligence is questioned. So that's another thing that I usually try and tone down. So at least she doesn't, make her look, trying to be serious and being funny. But that's one thing I keep in mind.
Yeah, it's a tricky. Jen, did you have an answer for that? Do you have a place where you pull back?
I don't. I just write what I write, and I figure the editor can take it out if they really think it's too much. It's never happened that I recall.
Yeah, because I think your voice is pretty consistent throughout in those books, at least the ones that I've read. So that makes sense to me. Sherry, what about you? Have you ever pulled back on the humor in terms of the actual bodies or death or anything?
Yeah, I don't joke around about the bodies. And I would be really careful if I was writing young children, or children probably too, which I really haven't done, but I would be careful with that.
Yeah, I think it is really tricky. Okay, this is the kind of great question as we're moving on. Are you all told you're funny in life? Do you like your friends think you're funny?
That's a very good question.
I know.
I knew I was on this panel, and I'm really not funny in person, am I, Sherry? I'm not Katrina McPherson.
You just made all of us laugh.
Yeah. You are lovely, Jen, in person.
Thank you, though, but it's like, Robin Williams the stuff would come out of his mouth, and you knew it wasn't rehearsed. It was just how he was. And Katrina has the same gift, Katrina McPherson, and Eddie Izzard, people like that. They're performers as much as anything. Yeah, I'm not sure that Robin Williams ever wrote a book. But I find the humor is kind of hard work, which, you know, doesn't really compute, but it's, in one way it evolves naturally, but it's also not something that I just go around being funny all the time. I just don't. I save it for the writing, maybe.
Yeah. How about you, Sherry? Do you crack people up?
People tell me I'm funny. I don't know. I always am afraid they're thinking like funny, you know. And so.
Yeah, you're pretty funny. Cindy, what about you?
I don't think I'm funny. I was very quiet as a kid. I mean, I was such a nerd that the Mean Girls didn't even bother messing around with me. But my friends, I don't know, maybe it's because I seem to have these humorous situations in my life that I have plenty of stories to tell. That's probably.
And Kate, what about you? Are you the jokester of your friends, or?
I'm not. I've never been like the class clown or the jokester, and I don't know if people think I'm funny in real life. I think maybe I save it for the page as well. And I think, you know, the people that are funniest sometimes don't know it. You know, I don't have friends telling me that all the time, but we're usually busy laughing together and feeding off of each other. And some of the best humor comes from the people you're with. You know, you kind of
it always rises to the level of, you know, whoever you're bantering with. I think it makes a big difference. I definitely feel like I'm wittier with certain friends, you know, in encounters than I am with other people. And so I always like to have those people around, I have to say. Okay, this is a good question from Drew Ann Love, whom we all love. Do you let your sidekick be funnier than your protagonist? Any of your sidekicks?
I try not to. I think that would be a bad thing, actually, if your sidekick is more interesting than your protagonist. When I was writing the second Chloe Jackson book, it's not exactly a sidekick, but it's a secondary character named Anne Williams. And she started to intrigue me more and more. And I was like, oh, I don't know if this is good or not. So.
I know, I think it's funny. I think they can take over the book. And if they are funnier, you kind of have to use them more discreetly.
Right.
And it's like, I call them the candy, and you can only use them for a little bit. And if they took over the whole book, it would be too much, right?
Right.
What about you, Kate? What in terms of sidekicks are? I mean, you've got quite a lot of friends.
Yeah.
You know, you've got Sage and you've got other people. What do you think?
Yeah, you know, my favorite character to write besides Parker was her brother Liam, who's kind of a hot mess. And you know, I think things with him, he can. I like the candy analogy too, but you know, for him, every scene he was in, he kind of lit up. At least for me, he did. His dialogue came very natural. Everything about him came very natural. And I think it's okay if there are sidekicks that are funny and hilarious. Sometimes I think those ensembles are what really enrich a story. So I haven't worried about them overshadowing the main character yet.
Yeah, Jen, what about you? Because you've got a lot of good. Well, you don't have a specific sidekick as much. Well, Cotton, but he's not as much a sidekick.
Yeah. Cotton is he's quirky a little bit. Yeah, he doesn't overshadow Max. Where the villagers themselves are funny. You know, little slices of their lives. I think that's where the humor comes in, not with the sidekick.
Yeah, I think that's right. And Cindy, what about you?
Yeah, I have an ensemble, so I think they each have their funny moments. I added a grandmother in the fourth book. I didn't want to copy Janet Ivanovich's Grandma Mazer, and this grandma just took over. I mean, she has a great sense. So if I ever think something's a little flat, Gran walks into this.
Yeah, it just pop them in. I know. Let's see. I think we have one more. We have time for one more question. Is there a way to drum up humor when you're struggling? Like, is there anything? I mean, Kate, you said that you would read some stuff or do music or something. Is there anything that's guaranteed to make you funny again?
You know what? I think for cozies, add a cat in the scene. And I say that like somewhat jesting, but there have been some scenes where I'm like, you know what? I think what this needs is more cats.
Cat.
And
in my case, like a lizard. That's
yeah, or a pet.
Yeah, kind of pet. Anybody else? Like, or is there anything you do in your house or with your thing? I know, Jen, you joked once about yodeling. I think that was a joke, but is there anything that you can kind of kick yourself in?
Chocolate. I eat chocolate.
Chocolate.
Chocolate. In fact, I used to go to the Safeway and I'd buy like 3 bags of M&Ms, and the guy would go, "Oh, you're writing today, huh?" I go, "Yeah."
Well, at least it's not vodka.
Yeah.
First, right? Sherry, how about you? Anything?
I can't think of anything specific. Honestly, my daughter is really funny, and so maybe talking to her because she's very, very witty and quick, and so
She'll cheer you up
Yeah.
and get you going. I know music can get me out of a bad mood. I think depending on if I can just put headphones on for a little bit, depending on that, I think that can work for me to get me a little bit funny again. Or I just watch What's Up Doc like 500 times over and over again. That always works for me. But I think we're actually at the end of our panel. I cannot thank you enough for opening up your houses and being here with us. And mostly thank you for your books. I love all of your books. I'm very grateful to have read them, and I will finish all of every one of them eventually. And yes, please, attendees, check out the books from these wonderful authors. And thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For moderating.
Thanks, Wendell.
good to see
Everyone.
all of you.
Pleasure. Thanks, you guys. Bye. Have a lovely rest of the conference.
You too. Bye.
Easy. Bye.